Imagine for a moment that you're part of the oversight committee that approves funding for one of the most secret spy agencies on the planet, the CIA. A piece of paper crosses your desk and you read the title in big bold letters, Project Acoustic Kitty. The page is mostly redacted, but the opening words read, "Our final examination of trained cats can be seen," before black bars cover the explanation. This is how the CIA spent millions of dollars in taxpayer money trying to train cats to spy on the Soviet Union during the Cold War. Yes, that's a sentence I just said. Yes, this is a true story. Post-World War II, the world entered a period of incredible tension, known as the Cold War. The Western Bloc, led by the United States, and the Eastern Bloc, led by the Soviet Union. While it didn't come to blows in terms of actual conflict between the two superpowers, they instead fought in different ways. Proxy wars, propaganda, the space race, technological advancement, sporting events, embargoes, and of course, espionage. In the 50s and 60s, the United States, as the leader of the Western Bloc, took the business of information incredibly serious. They deployed some of the most far-reaching and successful strategies that have ever existed, such as Project Rubicon, which used a third-party business to supply the world's governments with compromised encryption hardware and spied on the communications of over 120 countries for close to 50 years. They also, of course, used human resources with agents embedded wherever they thought possible to gather intelligence, but this, of course, had a massive implied risk, especially since the Soviets also had an impressive intelligence community of their own with the infamous KGB. So the CIA turned to some interesting out-of-the-box ideas. We've all heard of that theory, right? Birds aren't real and are actually government-operated spy devices. Well, I'm not sure about that, but what about cats? According to declassified documents which were disclosed in 2001, Project Acoustic Kitty was quite literally what it sounds like, a house cat that the CIA spent 5 years training to perform actions on command. If you're picturing a Puss in Boots looking cat, I don't blame you. Maybe a little hat, long black jacket, it's pretty fitting for how ridiculous this sounds, but of course the reality was much more grim than this. The surgeon spent an hour implanting a microphone in the cat's ear canal, a small radio transmitter at the base of its skull, and a thin wire into its fur. It's even claimed that they used the tail of the cat as an antenna. This would allow the feline infiltrator to eavesdrop on conversations in its immediate vicinity. And what vicinity were they aiming for, you ask? Well, the mission statement was for the cat to infiltrate the embassy buildings and the Kremlin, which was definitely shooting for the stars. The issues with the operation were probably what you would guess, and they were revealed very early in testing. You see, cats are not very good at following orders. Despite the $20 million spent on this project and the small victory of getting the cat to go to a location they specified, it would just get hungry and walk away. Of course, the CIA had a solution for this problem. They performed another operation, this time to try and suppress the special agent's snacking urges. This had limited success, but it was still better than nothing. They could now get a cat to move short distances and stay in a general location. At this point, they had a working prototype. Project Acoustic Kitty was the most expensive cat on the planet, fitted with state-of-the-art listening devices, and the first mission was greenlit. So, how did it go? With the grandiose idea that these super sleuth cats would be sneaking into some of the most highly guarded facilities on the planet, the field test was a bit of a letdown in vision. But of course you have to start somewhere, right? Like something out of a movie, the agents were in an unmarked van with no windows, surrounded by electronics and shitty burned coffee. Spy Cat's mission, should he choose to accept it, was to wander over to a bench and listen to two men having a conversation. Straightforward. If after 5 years and $20 million, they couldn't have a cat go to a bench and stay there, what hope would Spy Cat have of infiltrating the Kremlin and dodging the KGB? You can imagine the briefing for this one though. Listen up. Spy Cat will leave from the vehicle at 0900 hours. He will then proceed to the target. Alpha Team will be ready to listen in on the conversation. Spy Cat will then return to Alpha Team and we go home, job well done, celebrate with a saucer of milk. No one will notice Spy Cat, it's the perfect plan. Commence Alpha Mission. They opened the back door and like the special operative he was, Spy Cat headed towards the target with ultimate stealth. And then he was hit by a taxi. immediately. Within seconds of letting the super spy cat out of the van, it was dead. There in the van sat multiple agents of the most sophisticated spy agency on the planet, waiting to hear a clandestine conversation through their expensive listening device attached to a multi-million-dollar cyborg cat, and it was over before the cat moved 10 yards. When I talk about the top of my list for conversations I'd love to hear in real time, this is certainly one of them. I can't even begin to imagine what was said in the back of that van when they realised what had happened, even more so what they reported to their boss, who signed off on 5 years and $20 million of training a cat to perform the role of a super spy. Now, it is worth pointing out that reports regarding this are contested. According to Robert Wallace, former director of CIA's Office of Technical Service, Spy Cat actually survived, had the cyborg implants removed, and lived a happy long life. This is his word versus Victor Marchetti, who was special assistant to the deputy director of the CIA. So you can treat this section like a choose your own adventure. Did Spy Cat live, or did Spy Cat lose his life in the valiant service of his country and their fight against communism? Regardless of which story we believe, both of them agree that Project Acoustic Kitty was an abject failure. That being said, we do know what happened after this mission and to the brothers and sisters of the bold pioneer. Despite the absolute failure of the first mission, the CIA did continue on with the operation for a short while after. The logic being, if they could just figure out how to make the cat adhere to instructions a little bit better, the project had as much merit as the initial pitch. I mean, if you're in for a penny, you might as well be in for a pound, right? Unfortunately, as you might have guessed, they couldn't get the cats to do what they wanted to a sufficient degree. Perhaps the CIA had never heard the idiom herding cats, the futile attempt to control or organise a class of entities which are inherently uncontrollable. When they finally shut down the project, they had to fill out the paperwork on what had been done and their conclusions. This document is unfortunately heavily redacted, as are most of the files that become declassified, but what we can read is surprisingly upbeat considering what we've just heard about Project Acoustic Kitty. Subject: Views on trained cats. Our final examination of trained cats for use in the something convinced us that the program would not lend itself in a practical sense to our highly specialised needs. Repeated checks on state of training and equipment showed us that it was indeed possible to train, and then we have to assume they used some form of code word for Special Agent Spy Cats, as much of the rest is redacted. They then go on to praise themselves in the great scientific achievement that was made possible by the $20 million and 5 years of research. Apparently, whatever they redacted here is in and of itself a remarkable scientific achievement. Knowing that cats can indeed be trained to move short distances, we see no reason to believe that a something or a cat cannot be similarly trained to approach something. They conclude that the environmental and security factors in using this technique in a real foreign situation would not be practical. The CIA then also say that despite this colossal failure, it does reflect great credit on the personnel who guided it, particularly the person whose name they redacted, whose energy and imagination could be models for scientific pioneers. Now, far be it from me to disagree with the experts. What do I know about spying? But if this is the person who imagined up the idea of turning house cats into spies, I can't say I share their enthusiasm. Nor would I share that enthusiasm if I were one of the people who had oversight on what the CIA spends their budget on. I mean, $20 million to train a singular cyborg spy cat? I imagine this report is the CIA equivalent of just lying to your boss about how something went really well, but it just wasn't enough. They do essentially say it was a great success, just not for their specific mission of spying on the Soviet Union, which was pretty much their entire job at that time. At this point, you might also be wondering, what other animals have the CIA tried to train to be listening devices or other intelligence gathering apparatus? Well, they're usually closely held secrets. Maybe we'll find out one day, but the US government did in 2006 task scientists in DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, with creating remotely controlled cyborg beetles. They implanted neural devices into beetles, which allowed scientists to remotely control their movements. Think of a modern day drone you can buy on Amazon, but smaller than a coin and an actual living, breathing creature. If they were remote controlling bugs in 2006 and training cyborg spy cats in the 60s, kinda makes you wonder what they've been doing since then, doesn't it? That being said, this story, while funny in places, is an interesting look at the lengths the organisation will go to in their quest to gather intelligence across the globe. What to you and me might seem absolutely ridiculous, they saw as an opportunity to be seized. Perhaps that's the reason it was done in the first place. No one would ever look at a cat and think, I wonder if this is a CIA operative. Or maybe that's actually all part of the CIA's plan, to deter us from inspecting our feline friends too closely. Remember this story the next time a cat's around, it might just be a CIA spy cat